Hey everyone, Ben here. And welcome back to your favorite podcast where the host is mispronouncing the name of his guests. Well, today's a special episode because I'm joined by Tom Soderstrom, a true pioneer at the intersection of tech, transformation, and space exploration. Tom brings a wealth of experience from his time as CTO of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where he introduced cloud computing not only to JPL, but across NASA and broader US federal government. He since continued that journey at Amazon Web Services, helping organizations around the world transform how they build, operate, and innovate. In this episode, we talk about what really takes to drive meaningful change inside large institutions. We'll dive into the lessons he learned, leading innovation at NASA, what he's seeing from the front lines at AWS, and how leaders can turn vision into momentum. Whether you're navigating a transformation yourself or just curious about how cutting-edge technology meets real-world impact, this conversation is for you. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the Stellar Work Podcast.
Thank you very much, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for asking me to join.
Yeah, thank you so much. I saw you on LinkedIn. I clicked on your profile. I saw you with Matthias Patzak, who has already been on the pod. And you both were at the podium and sharing awesome insights with AWS. So I was super keen on having you here. Thank you so much for coming.
It's very funny, Ben, because I was going to suggest that you talk to Matthias. So how about that? He's a great, very knowledgeable and insightful and direct, which I like.
Yeah, he really is. Like I always ask him for advice when I'm not sure because he will give
Good.
you the answer right in your face.
Yeah, and he's almost always right, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. Like with this show, the first thing that everybody does on the pod is introduce himself, herself. So why don't you start with introducing yourself to our audience?
Okay. So my name is Tom Soderstrom. I grew up in Sweden, so it's Thomas Soderstrom if you speak Swedish. I am now living in Los Angeles in the place of fires and floods. And I used to work for NASA, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I was NASA's first Chief Technology Officer at a lab, Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in Los Angeles. And then I joined AWS 4.5 years ago to build a new organization in the public sector globally. And now I'm what's called an enterprise strategist, as is Matthias, where we are people who have led a transformation for companies or organizations. And now we talk about the lessons learned and what's coming next, helping enterprises kind of predict what to do and move forward. So it's a great job, actually. I really enjoy it. And so that's my job now, the enterprise strategist at AWS, a small company you might have heard of.
I have to ask this because I have a little. I am a child. I'm still a man child here. So
We are all
how is working at NASA? Like, did you build rockets?
yes, it's what's unique about Jet Propulsion Laboratory and NASA, and for people who are technical and who are listening to your talk, I highly recommend this. Learn hardware and software because the two together are solution to just about everything. And we tend to be hardware people or software people. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, it was engineering, it was science, and it was project management. Now, I'll tell you some stories about that if you want, but you have to understand every discipline because when you land on Mars, uh, and something goes wrong, Matt Damon isn't always there to save you. If you saw if you saw The Martian, uh, so it's a wonderful time in technology now. It's the people I've mentored and who have moved on in industry. They are intensely curious, and that's what my favorite leadership principle for Amazon is: learn and be curious. And I know you, Ben, from a previous conversation here, is intensely curious, and I think that's the key to everything. Otherwise, why bother if you're not trying to
Yeah,
figure out how things work?
yeah.
So NASA was fun, yes, and we did. It's a place where you are sitting and talking about people. Is there life out there, and how do we detect it, and how do we know? And you're not at a bar drinking beer; you're at work. It's pretty cool.
What did you learn at NASA that was useful in your job at AWS when you work with transformations?
I think it was NASA is a very large bureaucracy, just like a government agency is, but it has a fantastically interesting uh, mission. Is there life out there? Where did the universe come from? Where is it going? Can we redirect an asteroid if it were to hit us? Um, and was there life on Mars? Those are questions that matters to everybody. So what I learned more than anything is to focus on the mission of a company, not the little details that if you look at a big company, you have departments that grow up and they have goals, they have budget goals, they have hiring goals, and they end up competing with each other. And I was always confused as to why do we compete internally when the answer is much, much bigger than any of us. Long answer to it's all about the mission. And so if you can personalize the mission, then you have momentum, and momentum is everything. Sounds esoteric, but I can give some examples if that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, probably examples would be helpful because whenever I talk about missions with companies, they always pinpoint to the mission statement on the wall, which is also always really nice, but not very helpful.
Yeah, and then so let me pivot for a second to Amazon and then come back to NASA.
Hmm.
So Amazon does it better than anyone I've seen, and it is the mission statement. It is something called leadership principles. And those leadership principles are not something on the wall. They are, you live it. That's how you hire. That's how you reduce workforce. That's how you get budget. That's how you decide what to do. And so learn and be curious is one of them. Bias for action is another one. So when in doubt, move forward. And
Hmm.
one of my most useful one, I'll tell you this one, and we can talk about the others. But what's interesting about this one, why I go a little deeper, is everybody can follow this. That has nothing to do with Amazon. It's about how you work. Two-way, are you familiar with the term one-way and two-way door decisions?
Oh, I am, yeah, but maybe not everyone listening is, so it would
Okay.
be cool
It's
to.
one of the most useful things ever, and it fits right into you mentioned transformation. One-way door decisions is where you make a decision and you walk through that door and you can't come back. It's a very big decision. For AWS, and it's about building a new region somewhere. We're talking a lot of investment and money. The highest level manager needs to make that decision. A two-way door decision is a decision where the people who are closest to the problem can make that decision because you can unwrite that. So So I talked a lot about this, and I talked to that to my wife, and she wanted to have a new garden, and I'm fiscally responsible, so I said we don't need a new garden. Not a good move, by the way. And so she said, "Honey, is that a one-way or two-way door decision?" So we now have a new garden. But it's so useful, and we use that at NASA, at Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So if you can push the decision out to anybody who needs to make that decision, and the risk is minimal, you gain momentum, and now you can do things. So it's really about democratizing access to anything, because the risk of the decision is so little that it doesn't have to be a committee. If that makes sense. That's one of the most useful things.
It does make sense. But is there a certain way or strategy to find that threshold when it actually is a one-way door decision? Like you mentioned budget, but budget for, let's say, someone working within a team might be, if it's above 500,000, it very much feels like a one-way door decision. If you're an M&A consultant at, let's say, a private equity or whatever, 500,000 doesn't really feel like a one-way door decision.
Mhm. That's a good question, but it's the famous. It depends, but everything is about one. I mentioned momentum. That's number two. Number one, these days, I talked to 150 executives last year in person and their teams. What do you think the number one priority is right now?
Efficiency.
Close. It's speed.
Mm.
So it's speed to profitability, speed to market, speed to compliance. speed to upskilling the workers. So when you look at speed, and you have the mission of the company in mind, then the 500,000 or million doesn't matter that much, because another thing, I feel like I'm talking about Amazon HR culture here, but it's important and it's unusual. If you and I disagreed about something, our job is to escalate quickly. It is to go to our respective manager and say, Ben thinks this, Tom thinks this, what do you think? Because that person has a bigger purview, and
Hmm.
500,000 may not seem like a big deal to that person, but they can then make the decision quickly. And it's not personal. It's not that we're out to win. It's to make the decision for the speed to reach that mission, whether it is to detect if there's life out there, or if it is to figure out how to do serverless computing, etc.
How many, like you mentioned that you accompanying organizations through transformations when you work with AWS. How many transformations have you seen so far? What would you say? What is the rough number?
Oh, goodness. Hundreds. And it's what I like about this organization, we're called the Enterprise Strategist, is that we cover all businesses, all vertical markets. So my area of my background is engineering, of course, and software and space. But now I'm involved in anything from mining to sustainability to energy to insurance, banking. And what's interesting is you may think that, well, that's like everything, so it's nothing. But it's not. There are some lessons learned in transformation, especially for large companies, that transform all of those industries. And happy to talk about what we think those are. But so when we talk about transformation, there's many, many ones, and they vary based on the company, but people are people.
Hmm.
So when you talk about culture, that tends to be a common challenge and opportunity.
How do you approach a client that wants to go through a transformation and is asking you for your service or your help?
Good. I think the most important thing is I'm going to summarize the whole thing in 6 words.
Hmm. Okay.
It's to, and this is what we do with customers that are interested or non-customers, because we're not selling, we're trying to effect real transformation. We can talk about what that is too. So 6 words: think big, start small, scale fast. So think big is, what is the goal? And if the goal is speed to what? So think big, come up with some big things that are really important to business goals. Then start small is to experiment your way forward on each of those, and then pick the ones that matter the most. Business outcome, not technology or IT. And then scale fast. If you build it in the cloud, hopefully AWS cloud, but anybody's cloud, um, you will scale fast means it'll auto grow and shrink based on usage.
Hmm.
So what does that mean? The risk is minimal. So it becomes a prioritization process. And we created something we call, there's the Amazon culture of innovation. And there's a book called Working Backwards that describes it really well. Then there is the culture of experimentation that I am now involved with, which is a subset of that that can be inserted into any business unit essentially. So they can start small with the entire transformation because it's local. It's not so big to be overwhelming.
Let me get back to that. Think big, but start small. How do
Mhm.
you, let's say you have that big picture. How do you get to the point where you have an experiment so small that you'll be able to start? How do you boil it down? How do you find that one thing that everybody is eager to start?
I'll give you the recipe. And it doesn't mean that this recipe works for everybody, but it worked for us at Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA. And so what you do is, so with any project, the enemy is time and money. Turns out to be too much time and too much money. Because if you have too much time, you overcomplicate it and it takes too long. And those people who are key to the transformation or to that particular project gets pulled off as soon as there's a fire burning somewhere in the enterprise. Too much money means you have too big of a team. So you spend so much time communicating, you are not producing anything. So if that's the tenant, then how do you deal with it? So what I did when I did the transformation at Jet Propulsion Laboratory was to say, okay, we're going to talk to the business community that has a problem to solve. And then we're going to break it down into something that can be done in 2 weeks with 3 people. And that is the end of it. And at the end of 2 weeks, you then decide, did this really solve a problem or will it solve a problem that's worth solving? If not, park it. So who are the three? Business person who has the problem, an IT person who can help solve it, and cybersecurity for oversight, so that you don't take a huge risk and leak something. So now, then you've done that, how do you know if it matters? How do you know if it's important enough to take forward? Remember, this experimentation is a way of prioritizing the business impact. So what you do is you let the business side record a video, a 2-minute video, and then go show demos to the business community. The business person is demoing it. And if it matters, then other business communities will be interested. And now, what do you have? What do you measure? You don't measure return on investment because it was so fast and small that return on investment is this perceived big thing. You measure return on attention. Return on attention from the business community. Yes, I am interested. Will you show it to this person and this person and this person? And now, if you get this return on attention from 2 different business communities, you will absolutely get the investment. And now you can scale fast and start measuring return on investment on the bigger picture. So that whole thing really is about thinking big, coming up with what the goal is, and then iterating towards that goal. And there's a bunch of reasons why this culture of experimentation works. It's technology and it's people and it's incentives. And we can talk about that. But I've done it on so many, and customers who are doing this are benefiting because the risk is tiny. I mean, how many bad things can happen in 2 weeks with 3 people in an enterprise?
Right.
Because,
And depends on the enterprise, right?
yeah, but also you have cybersecurity to make sure you're not doing something really dumb. That took me a while to figure out, by the way.
Oh no.
Nothing major bad, but it was because in the end, cybersecurity is everything. It's for Amazon is priority one. But you gotta make sure you stay safe the whole way through. Because in the end, the people who can say, nah, this is not worth it and it's too dangerous is cybersecurity. So involve them early so that you build it right, and then it's
Mhm.
much faster to compliance.
Something that I've never heard before, and you just mentioned it like in a very nonchalant way, and I thought, let me get back to this. Is you do not measure return on investment. You measure, how did you call it?
Return on attention.
Return on intention. It almost sounded to me like something like a R number, like a virality rate of the idea or of the solution, in order to like, how many people are you reaching within your company, which equals to how many levers are you using to scale up your solution. And a
It's
company
good.
has like different measures to really
Yeah.
scale things up, and the more people you can influence with that, the bigger your lever is.
I think if you, good call out. Going in just a little deeper on return on attention. At JPL, we like algorithms. So ROA plus ROA equals ROI. So that's the goal. Do you
Mm-hmm.
get return on investment? If so, you get the investment. Now you can build it for bigger. But what does it mean? So I would measure it from a scale of 1 to 10. And an 8 was Ben, you're a business user, you were super interested, you recommend to another business user. That's an 8. So how do you get to a 10? If you really like this, Ben, as a business user, then you pick up the funding to build it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a 10. And if not, we have so many opportunities, we're going to park this. But we know it was interesting, so it'll come back later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you prioritize. And the other thing it does, it's it gets results quickly. And it's not theoretical result, it's a demo. It's not enough to have a paper. It's got to be something you can show. Then when you show that to the business users, it's also a fantastic opportunity for the people who built it to get FaceTime with the most senior leaders. Because those senior leaders, and we did this a lot at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, they'd love to see something quick, something real, something that solves a problem. So now you have these people who perhaps never met the senior leaders, and you can make an opportunity for them to meet and them showcasing their demo for 5 minutes and get input from those senior leaders. And now they start bonding.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing we saw is this is especially true in the enterprise. The number one barrier to transformation is the relationship between IT and the business. It's been true for a long time. You have the business tends to want to move fast, and the many different business units. IT, where I grew up, tends to want to do it right and once, and it creates friction. So this culture of experimentation is to bring the business problems and pair it with the IT people, and they solve it together, these three people. And when you do that, they're bonding, they're forming relationships that if you do this in parallel, now you have the business and IT starting to work together. We went so far at the JPL at the time to rebrand IT, to not be information technology, but to be innovating together. And it's a very practical, okay, we're innovating together. If you go up for your review, mention us and we'll mention you if we innovated together. And you just get innovation in parallel with a big momentum and very low risk. Because the number one question I get these days is, how do I innovate while I keep the lights on? Everybody's busy. Everybody's super busy. And it really comes down to prioritization for innovating while you keep the lights on,
Yeah.
gaining time.
Either
And
either that, or you do the big tech solution, which is small startup boats that you fund, that you have a seat on the board, that you
yeah,
eventually buy.
yes. And in fact, there's some data, and you may know this better than I do, that shows that if you have a technical person on the board, you increase your revenue and innovation speed by a dramatic factor. I can't remember exactly, but it was double-digit percent.
But it's really hard to get a technical person on the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a fun world to be working. So everybody who is in IT, especially now, and you're gonna slap me if you could, but you can't reach me. Is generative AI. It's a fantastic opportunity to innovate if you take advantage of it.
It was so interesting that you mentioned like the number one thing that happens on like when the number one reason why the transformations go bad is the gap between IT and business. Because for me, like when I graduated from university, I went into special machinery, electrical engineering, and I was designing, like I was responsible for the factory lines assembling magnetic chucks. So when you handle parts and you need to be very precise and very careful, you don't clamp them, you would hold
Uh-huh.
it with a magnet. And that magnet needs to be managed somehow. So you need to turn it off and on, and that's quite difficult with magnets because magnets don't like to work that way on their own. And I was doing the factory design, factory layout, and I was always puzzled. Like, if you would change something on the design, you could make it way more, way more efficient on the factory floor. You could make things way more maintainable. But those departments, like the one working in construction and design of the modules, they were not. They don't have like a factory person within their team, or
Right.
they wouldn't consult people from the factory floor. So I was always looking forward to like, hey, do we build a cross-functional team? Like, could I advise you? Could I like join a review meeting, anything? But they would say like, no, like that's not your job. You should focus there. And yes, I just graduated university, so I don't blame them for doing that. However, that was so long ago, and yet still, when I interviewed Anja Händel, which is just the episode that I just released from Deconium, she did a bunch of transformations with Mercedes, with Volkswagen, and Porsche. And she mentioned the same thing. When I interviewed your colleague Matthias and Sophie, who are doing transformations, they
Yeah.
mentioned the same thing. Still, like after, what is that, 15 years ago?
I know. Yeah.
It's still the same thing. So do you have any advice, like secret sauce tips, very much welcome, on how to bring those
Sure.
two closer together? You already mentioned a couple of things, but do you have even more?
I do. And it is interesting. My background goes back even more, and it was still when I came in as NASA's first CTO. I grew up at Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a programmer, programming the Deep Space Network, and then became a leader and for a consulting company, managed that. Went off for 10 years and did startups and worked for large companies across the world. Came back to NASA, to Jet Propulsion Laboratory as the first CTO at the center. And I thought everybody would love me because I grew up there, I knew the mission, and so I knew the business, and I've been bringing industry expertise and being able to have a responsible title, be able to do something. But they didn't love me because I was in IT, and the business and IT were the businesses, which is in engineering and science in that case, saw IT as too slow. And now, all these years later, it's still the same. So, how do you overcome this? That would be a good opportunity for your next show. It's incentives, and in the end, it's understanding each other. So, one of the first things I ended up doing was, of course, rebranding IT to innovating together. But also, and my boss at the time, the CIO, Jim Rinaldi, was very supportive. And we would meet every year and say, how do we change this and move it forward? And it was working and just talking to the business leaders about what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And how can we help? Now, that's one side, and that's very nice. But how can we help? Here's some new technology coming in that can help solve your problem. But the wrong way would be to say, Benjamin, I know you're a business person and you're expert in your world. Let me tell you how you solve your problem.
Hmm.
That does not go over well. So you have to listen first. You have to say, okay, what are the business problems that we're trying to do, and how can we solve them quickly? At least starting to show pieces of it in 2 weeks. And that is about getting people to have the same incentive, which is to solve this business problem quickly. And now you have a story you can talk about. And if you do what we did, which is have the business user demo it, the IT person videotape it with their Android or iPhone or whatever they happen to have. And then now you have, if somebody asks about it later, you can just send them that link. You store it on a website. So you can reach a broad community and you can be personal at the same time. And so it really is about going out and seeking out those problems to be solved, small or big. And let me ask you this, your opinion, and there's no right answer. So you have several opportunities. Which one do you start with? The most impactful one or the easiest one? When you bring in new technology,
Hmm.
which you do all the time, you start with the biggest impact or the simplest one? to get done?
I probably start with the biggest impact because
And I would
it's
say,
just like the nature of how I'm interested in stuff. Like if it doesn't impact anything, I'm losing interest in it very quickly.
but can you really solve something that has a large impact in 2 weeks?
Uh,
Because what you're really trying to do is you're trying to bring in this new technology and see if it can solve a problem. If
mm,
so, it'll go faster and climb up higher in the tree if you pick the low-hanging fruit.
mm,
So I recommend starting with a simple thing, showing success, and then you then move forward within the business community and the IT community. That's how we introduced all the new technologies. At the time, data visualization, machine learning, Internet of Things, serverless computing, cloud, all of those, and augmented reality, virtual reality. We did all of those things very early, if not first, even though we were a government entity, which people tend to think are slow, um, because of this experimental culture and trying to learn on something easy before you dive into the big things. It's the old one. You only have one time to make a first impression,
mhm.
so make it work. Here's an interesting one. I heard this. I wish I was smart enough to think this up, but I didn't. Ford Motor Company did a study about year 2000, and they found that they wanted to know what made a person successful within Ford. And they found an answer when you mentioned analytics. So they ran the analytics. Guess what they found? What made the person most successful within Ford?
Oh, somebody listening will not be happy hearing me say that, but time spent in the company.
It was that led to time spent in the company,
Mhm.
but it was actually the very first job. If it was successful, they were more likely to be successful. If it
Like
was
the
not,
very
they were
first
less
job that
likely.
they had at Ford.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what does that mean practically? Have some projects ready to go. So when people come in that are doable but challenging,
Mhm.
because statistically they're going to be more successful and stay longer. So it's kind of an interesting insight. So I
Yeah.
followed that, and we did a lot of those projects. And it's fun for people to get recognition from their peers. I think that's the most important recognition, actually, peer recognition.
Yeah.
And if they solve business problems, it's more fun.
You mentioned AI, and we already talked about like building a small team and starting small. Where do you see the trend go with AI? I'm sure you see different teams engaging with different uh, tools that just recently came out. Where do you see the trajectory of how teams start small with transformations using AI? Is there any trends that you would see?
Sure. Um, what I'm going to do, AI cuts through all of them. So I'm going to give you four business trends, four IT trends and four business trends quickly.
Okay. Mhm.
So, and on the IT side, or technology side, if you're successful at those, learn how to do them, you can now address the business problems or challenges that are coming. So the IT, the first one is generative AI and cloud. They go together, and we talk about that a lot. So I can go deeper if you want, but it's not technology shiny thing. It's the way we work and live. So cloud is the technology side. Generative AI is the people side, if you will. Next one is the growth of data. So much more data. Last I looked, we were generating 1.6 megabytes per second per person in the world. That's a lot of data. So how do you deal with it? How do you store it? What's important? How do you do analytics on it? Because data drives everything. One of the most common questions I hear now is, how do I monetize my data from a business community? And that's an interesting discussion, and how you deal with data. So we can dive deeper there if you want. So cloud and generative AI,
Mhm.
data, then productive at the edge. A lot of devices are becoming very powerful. So Internet of Things it's hitting its stride. Anything from self-driving cars to self-driving trains. By the way, the biggest robot in the world is in Australia. It's an automated train. It's huge. So is that an Internet of Things device? A spacecraft, is that an Internet of Things device? Yes and yes. So Internet of Things, productive at the edge, and it will go something like this. The data, take a smart camera in an airport looking for suspected terrorists, let's say. Doesn't need to do anything until it detects what it thinks is a suspected terrorist or on the watch list, sends the data back in the cloud, and now when you take that at scale, you've collected a lot of information, and you can now squeeze that algorithm down so it fits on that device, and now it can sit and collect data by itself. So you reduce the amount of bandwidth, and it's still productive. And you can get new algorithms updates over the air. So that's the third one. The
Mhm.
fourth one is digital twins. Now, it's been around forever. But what really happens is when you did that with the airport, you now have essentially a digital twin that you can start querying. And how do you query it most effectively? Generative AI. You ask questions about this complicated IT environment with many devices. And you can now then start experimenting, inject faults into the digital twin. If you trust that it's a copy of the physical, you can now, my father used to say, measure twice, cut once. Well, now you can measure 100,000 times and deploy once. So those are the IT ones. And AI, machine learning is table stakes now. It cuts through all of those. Lots of data, of course, cloud, being able to analyze all the data coming back. So how does AI fit in? I think machine learning for everything, and then generative AI as we're learning it, but being able to bring in the entire company to ask questions and have conversations. And executives can have actual conversations, even speaking with their own data. So those are the IT trends. And any thoughts before I go, or should I talk
Yeah,
about the business trends?
I do have questions because what I saw with the earlier AI models that came out, that if you fed them data that has already been generated by another AI, you would see a decrease in the quality of the output. Um, in Germany, we call that the Habsburger effect or syndrome.
Mhm.
And I was wondering, since like so much data gets generated by AI by now, people are not typing anymore. People are prompting. People are not
Yeah.
doing a video, they're prompting a video. So much of the data that gets pushed out into the ether is already generated. So I'm wondering if like data could be a scarce resource in the future, like organic data that is out there is a scarce resource in the future.
So when I mentioned that last trend that you can inject faults,
Mhm.
that's synthetic data. So synthetic data is a fantastic opportunity. Let's take an aircraft. Uh, do you have to go with a hammer and dent the metal to see what would happen? Or can you inject pictures of dented metal and run machine learning on that? Perhaps
Mm,
reinforcement learning where
mm,
you can
mm,
understand it much better. So I think synthetic data is going to be key. That's a huge business opportunity for somebody. We're not seeing enough companies generating credible synthetic data yet.
mm,
AWS is, we're doing our part, but there's a lot of room there. Um, when it comes to trusting, generative AI in particular, until we trust the output and say, yeah, this model is not hallucinating, it's not going to take off enough. So that's one of the areas that AWS has spent a lot of time on, mathematically proving that it's not hallucinating. The simple way of doing that, again, we're talking about the technology is not spread because it's excellent. It's spread because people think it's excellent. So people are key. And a way to train to make sure that you trust that model is to ask questions about yourself that you, or something you know the answer to. And
mm,
then you can correct the model and say, no, you're wrong. Actually, in my case, one time I said, who's Tom Soderstrom at AWS? Well, Tom Soderstrom doesn't work at AWS. Well, because it was data that was older than before I joined.
Yeah. So it's like that human reinforced learning.
Yes, exactly. And so I think that's you have to measure drift and you have to measure bias. But how do you do that? Uh, in the old days, we would say, "Give me $20 million in 4 years, and I'll have a really good data strategy for you." What do you think how would that go over today?
Oh, that's way too much.
Instead, what you do is, I'll do one of these experiments, which is fast and easy and engaging. Then I will see for the data strategy, did I have the data I needed? Good. Did I know who to ask? Okay. Did I have neither? I need to go update the data strategy. And so if you do that every single time you do a project that goes all the way through the business, you can build it in place and not have to wait and retrofit it at the end.
Let's go to the business side of things.
Sure. They're not surprising. Came up with this. It's going on almost a year now, and they've taken off. One of them is sustainability. Climate change is generating a lot of risk. If you have a factory in a place that's about to be flooded, what do? Well, you move the factory. Um, and then, so sustainability cuts through everything. One of the biggest opportunities there is digital twins. So if you can have a digital twin of an entire country, I know Germany was trying to do this actually. And now you can actually ask questions. Where is the next flood, et cetera, get people engaged. Fantastic opportunity. So sustainability and climate change cuts through everything. Then the next one is geopolitical changes. So what happens here is you'll have lots of new factions, and not to go into politics, but what does it mean for business? You need to have a backup supply chain. You need to have backup suppliers. If all you have is fiber coming to your country, you better have a backup with satellites so that you always have the opportunity to communicate, because that's the key. And then the next one is I'm going to pick on the space economy. Of course, that's where I grew up, but it's a fantastic opportunity. Estimates are running from about $350 billion worth globally today to 1.8 trillion in 6 years. So it's a fantastic growth. And it's not just about governments funding it. It's actually private businesses surpassing government very shortly in funding space. There's business opportunities. Each of the entities or pieces of space has gone down at about 5% of what it was just 20 years ago. Building a spacecraft, launching it, the instruments that go on it, taking the data down, doing something with it. So it's a great opportunity for anybody because the data lives in the cloud, so you don't actually have to even build a spacecraft to participate. And the fourth, so global climate change, geopolitical change, new space economy. The fourth is the biggest opportunity of all. It's where each company sits down and says, what is most important to us with all of these IT technologies come, and be a first mover to create this new trend. So it's like looking in the mirror. We did that. I highly recommend doing this think big exercise on what could hurt our company if you're an enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
What could hurt us? But you have to do it when times are good. Because when times are bad, everybody's in self-protection mode and they're not going to, it's not going to be, is it good to do A or B? It's going to be, is it Ben or Tom that's going to keep their job? Not very productive. Instead, think about the threats to your business. How do you see them? What do you do if they happen, and how do you see them coming? We did this at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and saw 6 really bad things. And we had a plan for each of them, and we had a way of mitigating it and see it coming. And in the end, over time, 5 of them happened. So, and there wasn't an impact because we had thought about it in a more analytical way when times were good. So highly recommend. So
Like
that's
something
that's
happens,
fun.
like space war is coming out, you just pull the drawer, get your paperwork out, and execute the
Yeah,
protocol
yeah.
that way.
And Yeah, essentially, and as everybody knows, if a plan is only a plan, it's going to change. But you've thought about it, and if you don't have a plan, you don't have a chance. If you have a plan, you modify the plan quickly.
Yeah.
But it's not so emotional at the time.
Mm.
And this goes for things that could go wrong or new businesses that we want to get into. What are some new areas? And I think, again, data is a fantastic opportunity. If you're a supplier to, let's take aircraft industry, and you somehow sell the analytics back to your customers or cars, so that IoT, digital twins, data, and then using machine learning to really analyze it. That's, I think, the simplest answer how to monetize data.
How
Or if
about
you're an insurance company and you look at sustainability, there's lots of companies out there now that are doing very well at having a contract with the government saying, this is how much insurance should cost in this area,
mm,
whether it's fire, like I'm looking out my window, or if it's floods, etc.
how far do you think are we when it comes to really making those like reliable, profitable business models out of that data?
I think we're, so how far are we? I would say the approach is straightforward.
Hmm.
The approach is that experimental way and testing it. Is it working? Is it working? Is it worth it? If it's not worth it, fuck it. So that Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, had a great lesson that I really took to heart. Sunk costs don't matter. That's a pretty strong statement. Sunk costs because you're tempted to just continue to fund it just because you funded it.
Hmm.
Instead, you need to look at what happens if I fund it, forgetting what I've done before. And that's difficult for businesses to do, but I think it's super important.
That's also difficult for humans to do. I think that is a
Oh, yeah.
very human thing to struggle with.
And that's why this culture of experimentation and culture of innovation is important because it's not about the person being right or wrong. It's about the risk being so small that it's okay to iterate. It doesn't. If I come up with something and you're the manager and I say I'm going to try this, and you say, okay, I tried, and it wasn't worth it. Good. Edison learned 1,000 ways of not building a light bulb, but eventually they built a light bulb. So I think it sounds esoteric, but it works. And that's how you know if something is worth it or not, by measuring it, testing it, and are people adopting it? That's really the key.
We're slowly approaching the end of the podcast, and I wanted to ask you if an engineering manager or a CTO would approach you and ask you for like the one advice on transformation, whether it is like transforming a business or adopting new technology and putting it into the business model. What is like the number one advice that you would give to such a person?
Can I give two quick answers, different audience?
Mm-hmm.
So, one, if you are a leader of the company and you realize that you need change, if you are all the way centralized and you bring in a new leader who wants to all the way decentralize, that's the wrong answer. If you're all decentralized and the new leader wants to centralize, that's also the wrong answer. Because you have to take the culture of the company into account. And so iterating, so not overswinging that pendulum to centralization or decentralization is key. And we see that a lot. And you
So it's really
create a lot.
start with what you have as a culture, as a company, and start like think where you can go from where you are now.
Yeah. And without having these huge shifts immediately. Because if you do that, you're going to lose a lot of people that are actually very valuable, but they need to be allowed to do what they need to do. And I would say, if in doubt, decentralize because you need the innovation at speed. But there's some things that should be centralized,
Mm.
cybersecurity models, etc. So that's the thing from the top leaders. Don't
Mhm.
over change too much because you're going to lose a lot of time and speed is everything. And now you're going to lose speed and momentum. If you are an engineering manager, Think about what's going to be successful. The answer is actually pretty simple if you look back at history. It's whatever the developers want. So because they're going to do that anyway. So if you are preaching from the pulpit that you should do A, and all the developers see that B actually is much more effective, they're going to do B. So have that conversation and allow them to experiment and bring in new technology that makes sense to them. When I started with cloud in Jet Propulsion Laboratory and then NASA, after a little bit, I asked the developers, I said, just write on a piece of paper, what technologies do you use? And they wrote them down. I did not know half the words. And I was the CTO. So I'm saying, okay, I'm going to get myself out of that and look at culture and drive the adoption of new technology. And it worked really well. It's changing so fast.
So how can we summarize that in like a sentence or two?
Yeah. Don't overswing the pendulum towards centralization or decentralization. Think about the business impact, delivering results now. If you're an engineering manager, do two things. Understand what technologies are coming and are useful from the developers, and go talk to the business community to see what problems you need to solve quickly. I'd say that's how I would start it.
Thanks. Tom, thank you so much for taking the
Thanks.
time coming on the show.
Thank you, Ben. This has been a pleasure.
I really learned a ton from you. Thank you so much. If people want to engage with you or maybe have questions, where do people find you?
I think the easiest is probably on LinkedIn. Tom Soderstrom on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest. Or email me at sodertom@amazon.com.
All right.
Thank you, Ben. This has been a true pleasure. I really like what you're doing. And
Thank you.
thanks for letting me be part of it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for being here. For everyone, I will provide all the links below. So if you open up the show notes, you will see all the contacts and the link to Tom's LinkedIn account as well. All right.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
That's it. Thank you so much for tuning in. This podcast is part of my consultancy startup that runs by the same name. Whether it's applying AI, agile, adopting new technology, or exploring new markets, our analysis services help you to stay on track and deliver measurable results. Don't just trust your gut when it comes to organizing work. Trust your gut and the ones from your colleagues. And data, of course. Within just a week, we're able to give you a comprehensive insight into what drives your needle forward. Hit us up. That's it. See you next week. Bye-bye.